August 28th, 2013. It was a typical, balmy summer evening in Brown County, Ohio. Brittany Sherry Stykes, a vibrant 22-year-old, carefully secured her 4-month-old daughter in the back of her bright yellow Jeep Wrangler. Brittany, pregnant with her second child, had a radiant glow about her, a visible promise of the joy a growing family brings. She tenderly kissed her toddler's forehead before settling into the driver's seat. The drive along State Route 68, near Ripley, should have been a breeze, a route Brittany knew like the back of her hand, having traveled it countless times. Fields stretched out endlessly on both sides, bathed in the golden hues of the fading sunlight. Her daughter, happily gurgling and babbling, filled the back seat with innocent sounds. Then, without warning, the peace shattered. Gunfire erupted, multiple shots piercing the air and striking the Jeep. The vehicle bucked violently, its tires screaming against the asphalt as Brittany struggled to maintain control before it careened off the road, crashing into an embankment. Passers-by, witnessing the horrifying scene, rushed to the wreckage, their hands trembling as they dialed 911. They found Brittany slumped over, unresponsive, her life tragically extinguished. Miraculously, her daughter was still breathing, despite a gunshot wound to her tiny head. More than a decade has now passed, and the case remains a chilling, unsolved mystery. What truly unfolded on that seemingly tranquil country road that evening? Before we delve deeper into this story, please take a moment to drop a comment with your country and the current time where you are. The yellow Jeep Wrangler, parked in the driveway, seemed to represent a beacon of ordinary life. Brittany Stykes emerged from her simple Brown County home, her pregnant belly gently outlined beneath a loose-fitting summer dress. The August heat radiated off the pavement, creating shimmering waves, yet a soft breeze carried the fresh, clean scent of freshly cut grass from the neighboring yards. Her 4-month-old daughter, wobbly and unsteady on her legs, toddled toward the vehicle, her innocent giggles filling the air. As Brittany scooped her up into her arms, the toddler's dark eyes sparkled with pure, unadulterated joy, blissfully unaware of the world's dangers. Brittany kissed her daughter's cheek, inhaling that sweet, comforting baby smell that always made her heart swell with protective love. "Ready for our little adventure, sweetheart?" she whispered, expertly securing the car seat straps. With practiced ease, her wedding ring, a symbol of her commitment and love, caught the late afternoon sun as she adjusted the straps. At just 22 years old, Brittany had already built a life firmly rooted in family and faith. Her husband worked tirelessly to provide for them, and soon they would be welcoming another precious child into their expanding circle of love. The Jeep's engine turned over with a familiar, comforting rumble. Brittany adjusted her rearview mirror, glancing at her daughter one last time before carefully backing out of the driveway. The child had already found her favorite toy, a small, well-loved stuffed animal that rarely left her side. Everything felt completely normal, beautifully mundane in that moment. State Route 68 stretched out ahead, a ribbon of asphalt winding its way through Brown County's rolling countryside. Cornfields lined both sides of the two-lane road, their green stalks reaching toward the sky, painted with soft pastel colors. This was quintessential Ohio farmland at its most peaceful, a place where generations of families had raised their children and built quiet, meaningful lives. Brittany drove with care, acutely aware of her precious cargo. The radio played softly, a country song crooning about small-town dreams and endless possibilities. She hummed along, her hand resting gently on her growing belly, where her second child grew stronger with each passing day. Life felt full of promise, abundant with the simple joys that truly mattered most. The sun began its slow descent towards the horizon, casting long, dancing shadows across the golden fields. Other vehicles passed occasionally, pickup trucks heading home after a long day's work, an elderly farmer in his well-worn sedan, Everyone in Brown County knew these roads intimately, having traveled them thousands of times throughout their lives. They represented safety, familiarity, a sense of community, and bonds that stretched back for decades. Brittany's phone buzzed with a text message, but she chose to ignore it. Driving demanded her full attention, especially with her daughter's safety completely dependent on her. The baby had grown quiet in the back seat, perhaps lulled into a peaceful state by the Jeep's gentle motion. These were the moments Brittany treasured most, just her and her child, moving through the world together. The road curved gently ahead, following the natural contours of the landscape. No other traffic was visible in either direction. The cornfields seemed to whisper. In the gentle evening breeze, a comforting sound that had soothed countless travelers along this same stretch of highway. Everything appeared perfectly normal, exactly as it should be on a peaceful summer evening in rural Ohio. Then, without warning, the first gunshot exploded through the twilight. The windshield instantly spiderwebbed, showering the interior with fragments of shattered glass. Brittany's scream caught in her throat as she desperately fought to maintain control of the steering wheel. More shots followed in rapid succession, each one finding its mark with terrifying precision. The Jeep lurched violently to the right, its tires squealing in protest against the hot asphalt. Time seemed to both slow down and accelerate simultaneously. The yellow vehicle careened off the roadway, bouncing through the shallow ditch before slamming into the earthen embankment with a sickening crunch of metal and glass. Steam hissed from the damaged radiator as the engine died. With a final shudder, silence returned to State Route 68, broken only by the distant sound of crying emanating from the back seat. Two vehicles approached the crash scene almost simultaneously. The first was driven by Robert Henderson, a local farmer heading home after checking on his cattle. The second carried Maria Santos, a dedicated nurse, just finishing her shift at the county medical center. Both drivers had traveled this road countless times, but nothing could have prepared them for the horrific scene they were about to encounter. Henderson spotted the crumpled yellow Jeep. First, his headlights illuminating the scene of utter destruction. He pulled over immediately, his hands shaking uncontrollably as he reached for his cell phone. The vehicle had struck the embankment. With tremendous force, the front end completely caved in. Steam rose from the engine compartment like ghostly fingers reaching into the gathering darkness. Santos arrived just seconds later, her medical training instantly kicking in despite the shock. She grabbed her emergency kit from the trunk and rushed towards the wreckage. The driver's door hung open at an unnatural angle, revealing the devastating scene inside. Brittany Stykes lay motionless behind the wheel, her young life tragically claimed by multiple gunshot wounds. But from the back seat came the sound that would forever haunt both witnesses, the weak but persistent crying of a wounded child. The 4-month-old girl remained strapped in her car seat, blood trickling from a head wound that should have been fatal. Her beloved stuffed animal lay discarded on the floor, a small casualty in an incomprehensible act of violence. Henderson's 911 call crackled through the emergency dispatch system at precisely 8:47 p.m. His voice trembled as he struggled to describe the scene, searching for words to convey such senseless brutality. Santos had already begun triage, frantically checking Brittany's vital signs while simultaneously assessing the child's condition. "We need life flight," she told the dispatcher, her professional composure barely containing her overwhelming emotional turmoil. "The mother is deceased, but the baby is alive. Gunshot wound to the head, but she's breathing on her own." Emergency vehicles began converging on the scene within minutes. The flashing red and blue lights transformed the quiet countryside into a surreal landscape of crisis and chaos. State troopers secured the perimeter while paramedics worked frantically to stabilize the wounded child for transport to Cincinnati Children's Hospital. Sheriff Mike Thompson arrived just as the helicopter lifted off, its rotors beating against the night sky like mechanical thunder. He had served Brown county for over 2 decades, but nothing in his extensive experience had prepared him for this level of violence. Young mothers didn't just get gunned down on rural highways without a reason. Yet, the scene before him defied all logical explanation. The Jeep told its own story through bullet holes and blood spatter. Multiple shots had been fired from outside the vehicle, suggesting either a planned ambush or a random act of unspeakable cruelty. No valuables appear to have been taken, ruling out robbery as a motive. Brittany's purse remained untouched, her wedding ring still adorning her finger. Deputies began the methodical process of evidence collection, marking shell casings and documenting the trajectory of each bullet. Crime scene tape fluttered in the evening breeze as investigators photographed every angle, every detail that might eventually lead to justice. The work continued long into the night, illuminated by portable floodlights that cast stark shadows across the devastation. News of the shooting spread through Brown County like wildfire. By dawn, radio stations and local newspapers were reporting the basic facts. A young mother dead, her baby fighting for her life at Cincinnati Children's Hospital. Social media amplified the horror, transforming a local tragedy into a regional headline news story. The Stykes family gathered at the hospital, their lives forever, irrevocably changed by a single phone call in the middle of the night. Brittany's parents, themselves grandparents for barely more than a year, now faced the dual reality of grieving the loss of their daughter while simultaneously praying for their granddaughter's survival. The waiting room became a sanctuary of grief and fragile hope, filled with whispered prayers and tear-stained faces. Dr. Patricia Williams, the pediatric neurosurgeon leading the child's care, delivered cautiously optimistic updates every few hours. The bullet had grazed the toddler's skull, but miraculously avoided penetrating the brain itself. Surgery had been successful in cleaning the wound and relieving pressure, but the next 48 hours would be absolutely critical. "She's a fighter," Dr. Williams told the family, her professional demeanor softened by genuine compassion. "Children are remarkably resilient, and she's already showing signs of responsiveness. We have every reason to hope for a full recovery." The community response was immediate and overwhelming. Churches organized prayer vigils. Local businesses collected donations for medical expenses and volunteers, organized meal trains for the grieving family. Brown County's population of just over 44,000 had always prided itself on taking care of its own, but this level of tragedy tested everyone's faith and resilience. Sheriff Thompson held his first press conference at the county courthouse, facing a crowd of reporters and concerned citizens. The questions came fast and hard. Was this a random shooting? Did Brittany have any enemies? Was there a threat to public safety? His answers were necessarily limited by the ongoing investigation, but his commitment was absolute. "We will not rest until we find who did this," he declared, his voice carrying the weight of personal promise. Brittany Stykes was a young mother with her whole life ahead of her. Her daughter deserves to grow up knowing justice was served. This community deserves to feel safe again. Behind the scenes, investigators were already pursuing multiple leads. Brittany's cell phone records were subpoenaed, her social media accounts scrutinized, her daily routines meticulously mapped out. Friends and family members sat through lengthy interviews, their grief compounded by the necessity of reliving painful memories in service of the investigation. The Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation deployed their mobile crime lab to Brown County, bringing advanced forensic capabilities to bear on the evidence. Ballistics experts examined the shell casings found at the scene, hoping to match them to weapons in existing databases. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit was consulted to develop a preliminary profile of the shooter. Yet, despite all the resources and expertise brought to bear, the case presented a frustrating puzzle. Brittany appeared to have been a random target, driving a familiar route at a routine time. She had no known enemies, no involvement in dangerous activities, no obvious connection to criminal elements. The shootings seemed to emerge from nowhere, striking with devastating precision before vanishing back into the Ohio countryside. The crime scene on State Route 68 told a chilling story written in bullet trajectories and blood evidence. Detective Sarah Martinez of the Brown County Sheriff's Office had worked dozens of violent crimes, but this one felt different from the moment she arrived. The meticulous nature of the shooting suggested planning, yet the apparent randomness of the victim selection defied conventional criminal logic. Martinez coordinated with Agent Kevin Walsh from the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation, pooling their expertise to reconstruct the sequence of events. The shell casings indicated the shooter had used a high-powered rifle, firing from a concealed position approximately 150 yards from the road. Each shot had been carefully aimed, suggesting familiarity with firearms and possibly military or law enforcement training. This wasn't some punk kid with a Saturday night special, Walsh observed, examining the ballistics evidence through a magnifying glass. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. They picked their position, waited for the right moment, and executed a plan with military precision. The investigation team expanded to include FBI Special Agent Diana Foster, whose expertise in violent crime analysis brought federal resources to bear on the case. Foster's arrival signaled the seriousness with which authorities were treating the shooting, elevating it from local tragedy to multi-jurisdictional priority. Crime scene technicians worked methodically through the evidence, collecting samples that might eventually yield DNA or other identifying information. The shooter's position was carefully mapped and searched, but no physical evidence remained. The perpetrator had been disciplined enough to police their brass and leave no trace of their presence. Investigators began the painstaking process of background checks on everyone in Brittany's life. Her husband submitted to lengthy questioning, his grief compounded by the terrible necessity of proving his innocence. Friends, coworkers, and even casual acquaintances found themselves under scrutiny as detectives searched for any connection that might explain the violence. We have to assume this was targeted until we can prove otherwise, Detective Martinez explained to the family during one of many difficult conversations. Random shootings like this are extremely rare. There's usually a connection we haven't found yet. A reason someone wanted Brittany dead. The community struggled to process this new reality. Brown County had always been a place where people left their doors unlocked, where children played outside. Until dark without fear. The shooting shattered that sense of security, replacing it with suspicion and paranoia that poisoned even the most innocent interactions. Local gun shops reported increased sales as residents armed themselves against an undefined threat. Parents kept their children closer, altered their driving routes, installed security systems they had never thought necessary. The ripple effects of violence extended far beyond the immediate victims, transforming an entire community's relationship with safety and trust. At Cincinnati Children's Hospital, Brittany's daughter fought the battle of her young life. The surgical team had worked tirelessly through the night to repair the damage from her head wound, their skill and dedication creating a miracle from what should have been a certain tragedy. The child's grandmother maintained a constant vigil, holding her tiny hands and whispering lullabies through tears. Dr. Williams provided regular updates that became beacons of hope in the darkness of grief. The child's vital signs remained stable. Her neurological responses were encouraging. Each small movement, every fleeting smile represented victory over the forces that had tried to destroy an innocent family. She opened her eyes this morning and looked right at me. The grandmother reported to gathered family members, her voice breaking with emotion. It was like she was saying she's not giving up, that she's going to fight through this for her mama. The intensive care unit became a focal point for the extended family's grief and healing. Relatives traveled from across Ohio and neighboring states to offer support, creating an informal network of love and determination. They took turns reading stories, singing songs, and simply being present for a child who had already endured more trauma than anyone should experience in a lifetime. News media began covering the child's recovery with the same intensity they had devoted to the crime itself. Her survival story captured the public's imagination, transforming her from a victim to a symbol of resilience. Donations poured in from strangers moved by her plight, creating a trust fund that would ensure her future educational and medical needs were met. The FBI's involvement brought additional resources to the investigation, including access to national databases and behavioral analysis expertise. Agent Foster coordinated with local authorities to expand the scope of the inquiry, looking for similar crimes in other jurisdictions that might indicate a serial offender. "We're casting a wide net," she explained to Sheriff Thompson during one of their daily briefings. This level of planning and execution suggests someone with experience. They might have done this before, or they might do it again. We can't afford to think of this as an isolated incident until we know for certain. The investigation team grew to include specialists in forensic accounting, digital forensics, and criminal psychology. Every aspect of Brittany's life was examined in minute detail, from her high school yearbooks to her most recent credit card purchases. The goal was to find the thread that would unravel the mystery, the connection that would transform a senseless act into a solvable crime. The Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation's Mobile Forensics Unit represented the state's most advanced capabilities for processing violent crime scenes. Lead criminalist Dr. Robert Chen had worked hundreds of cases over his 15-year career, but the precision and planning evident in Brittany's murder set it apart from typical violent crimes. The shooter demonstrated exceptional discipline, Dr. Chen explained to the assembled investigative team. They selected an optimal firing position, waited for the target to enter the kill zone, and executed the attack with military efficiency. This wasn't a crime of passion or opportunity. It was an execution. The ballistics analysis revealed the use of a .308 Winchester rifle, a common hunting caliber that would not attract attention in rural Ohio. However, the modification patterns on the recovered bullets suggested custom hand loads, indicating the shooter's familiarity with ammunition preparation. This level of detail might eventually lead to identification through purchasing records or reloading equipment. DNA analysis of evidence collected from the scene yielded no results. The shooter had been careful not to leave biological trace evidence, another indication of planning and criminal sophistication. Even tire impressions from the shooter's vehicle had been obscured by subsequent traffic, eliminating another potential avenue for identification. Agent Walsh coordinated with the FBI's National Crime Information Center to search for similar cases nationwide. The query parameters included high-powered rifle attacks on vehicles, targeted shootings of young mothers, and crimes involving children as secondary victims. The database search would take time, but any matches might reveal patterns invisible to local investigators. Sheriff Thompson faced increasing pressure from both the media and the community for progress in the case. Daily press briefings became exercises in managing expectations while maintaining public confidence in the investigation. The questions grew more pointed with each passing day. Did police have any suspects? Was the community safe? When would there be an arrest? "We're following every lead, pursuing every possibility," Thompson assured reporters and concerned citizens. "This investigation has our full attention and resources. We won't stop until we find who did this to Brittany and her baby." The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit provided a preliminary profile of the offender based on crime scene analysis and victimology. The shooter was likely male, aged 25 to 45, with military or law enforcement training. He probably lived within 50 miles of Brown County and had some connection to the area that made him comfortable operating there. The profile would help chaos that had preceded it. Weeks passed without significant developments. Leads grew cold, and the reality of an unsolved case began to settle over Brown County like a morning fog. The community's initial shock transformed into a deeper, more persistent anxiety about safety and justice. Brittany's family maintained their vigil at the hospital while simultaneously planning a funeral that would honor her memory and celebrate her life. The juxtaposition of grief and hope, of endings and beginnings, reflected the complex emotions everyone felt as the child's recovery continued against all medical odds. The memorial service drew hundreds of mourners from across Southern Ohio. Friends from high school, coworkers, neighbors, and complete strangers united in their determination to remember Brittany as more than just a victim of violence. They shared stories of her kindness, her dreams for her growing family, and her infectious optimism about the future. Pastor Michael Edwards delivered a eulogy that tried to make sense of senseless loss while providing comfort to those who would continue living with questions that might never be answered. His words echoed through the packed church and beyond, carried by local media to viewers who had followed the story from its horrific beginning to this moment of collective mourning. Brittany's life was cut short, but her impact continues through everyone she touched, Pastor Edwards declared. Her daughter's survival reminds us that even in darkness, light persists. Even when evil seems to triumph, love endures. We may not understand why this happened, but we can choose how we respond. The investigation team faced the grim reality that their case was becoming a cold case despite their best efforts. All obvious leads have been exhausted, all logical suspects eliminated, all forensic evidence processed without yielding actionable intelligence. The shooter had seemingly vanished into the Ohio landscape, leaving behind only questions and grief. Detective Martinez coordinated with the National Crime Information Center to ensure all case details were properly entered into federal databases. This step would allow comparison with future cases and might eventually reveal connections invisible to current analysis. The NCIC entry would remain active indefinitely, a permanent flag in the system that might one day trigger a match with new evidence. The FBI's involvement began to scale back as federal resources were redirected to more promising cases. Agent Foster assured local authorities that the Bureau would respond immediately if new developments warranted federal attention. But day-to-day responsibility returned to Brown County investigators, who would carry this burden for years to come. 1 year after Brittany's murder, Brown County gathered to remember her life and renew their commitment to finding her killer. The anniversary brought fresh media attention to the case, with television reporters conducting interviews and newspaper articles recounting the tragic details that had shocked the community 12 months earlier. The vigil took place at the Ripley Community Center, where hundreds of candles flickered against the August evening darkness. Brittany's family stood together at the front of the crowd, their faces reflecting both the pain of loss and the strength that had carried them through the most difficult year of their lives. Sheriff Thompson addressed the gathering with words carefully chosen to balance honesty about the investigation's challenges with determination to continue the search for justice. "We have not forgotten Brittany," he declared to the assembled crowd. "We will never forget her. This case remains our top priority, and we continue to follow every lead, pursue every possibility." The child's recovery had progressed remarkably well, defying early medical predictions about potential long-term effects from her head injury. Now walking and beginning to speak her first words, she represented a living miracle that provided comfort to those struggling with the senseless violence that had claimed her mother's life. Local media coverage of the anniversary rekindled public interest in the case, generating dozens of new tips that investigators carefully evaluated and pursued. Most led nowhere, but each call represented community members' continued engagement with the search for answers. The sheriff's office had established a dedicated tip line that remained active, staffed by detectives who took every piece of information seriously. The FBI's involvement had transitioned to a consulting role, with agents available to assist if significant developments emerged. The case remained open in federal databases, and Agent Foster maintained regular contact with local investigators to review any new evidence or potential connections to other crimes. Brown County's sense of normalcy remained elusive even a year after the shooting. Parents still worried when their children were out of sight. Residents remained hyper-aware of their surroundings, and the simple act of driving alone on rural roads carried new anxieties. The community had adapted to living with unresolved fear, but the emotional toll was evident in changed behaviors and heightened tensions. The investigation team had grown smaller but remained dedicated. Detective Martinez coordinated with the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation to periodically review all evidence with fresh eyes, hoping that new forensic techniques or different analytical approaches might reveal previously overlooked clues lingered. Science relentlessly pushed forward, fostering the hope that future breakthroughs might finally crack even the most stubbornly resistant cold cases. Brittany's parents, Janet and Robert Stykes, channeled their profound grief into a steadfast and unwavering pursuit of justice. They established a scholarship fund in their beloved daughter's name, creating a foundation dedicated to supporting other families whose lives have been shattered by violent crime. They also maintained consistent and open communication with the investigators, determined to ensure that Brittany's case remained a top priority, never fading into obscurity. "We refuse to let her be forgotten," Janet declared with resolute conviction during a television interview that marked the grim 18-month anniversary of Brittany's murder. "Every single day, we wake up consumed by thoughts of her, and we go to sleep each night praying that tomorrow will bring the answers we so desperately need. Someone out there knows the truth about what happened, and we're not giving up, not ever, until they come forward and tell us what they know." The family's unwavering persistence played a crucial role in keeping media attention focused on the case for a far longer period than is typical for unsolved crimes. Their regular and heartfelt appeals for information, their dignified and composed handling of an unimaginable loss, and their granddaughter's remarkable and inspiring recovery story continued to deeply resonate with audiences not only across Ohio, but far beyond its borders. The child's developmental milestones became sources of bittersweet celebration, moments of immense joy tinged with the profound sadness of Brittany's absence. Her first tentative steps, her first precious words, and her second birthday party were all joyous occasions, but each one was inevitably shadowed by the absence of the young mother who should have been there to witness and cherish these irreplaceable moments. The grandmother who had become the child's primary caregiver spoke often and lovingly of Brittany, ensuring that the child would grow up knowing the depth and breadth of her mother's love. Even in the face of death's cruel finality, community support for the family remained remarkably strong, evolving from an immediate crisis response to a long-term commitment of enduring support. Local businesses continued their fundraising efforts, organizing events and donating proceeds to the scholarship fund. Churches maintained dedicated prayer ministries, offering solace and spiritual support. Neighbors selflessly offered practical help with childcare and daily tasks, easing the burden on the grieving family. Brown County's response to this devastating tragedy exemplified the very best of small-town values and the profound strength of mutual support. The investigation itself had settled into a routine of periodic review and diligent follow-up on the occasional new tips that trickled in. Detective Martinez meticulously maintained detailed files on every single aspect of the case, developing organized systems for tracking potential leads and maintaining regular communication with other law enforcement agencies that might encounter related evidence in their own investigations. Her unwavering dedication to solving Brittany's murder had become a defining aspect of her career in law enforcement, a testament to her commitment to justice. Sheriff Thompson faced considerable political pressure during his re-election campaign, with his opponents seizing upon the lack of progress in the county's most high-profile, unsolved case as a point of criticism. However, the voters recognized the inherent complexity of the investigation and acknowledged the department's continued and unwavering commitment to finding answers and bringing the perpetrator to justice. His victory reflected the community's deep-seated confidence in the ongoing efforts to achieve justice for Brittany and her grieving family. The broader law enforcement community had embraced the case as a crucial test of their collective capabilities, a challenge that demanded their combined expertise and resources. Training conferences featured detailed presentations about the investigation, seeking insights and perspectives from experienced officers who might recognize subtle patterns or suggest innovative new approaches. The case had become a valuable learning opportunity as well as an ongoing and relentless search for justice. Advances in forensic technology offered renewed hope for solving cold cases that had stumped investigators for years, seemingly impenetrable mysteries that defied resolution. The Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation's Crime Laboratory acquired enhanced DNA analysis capabilities, improved ballistics matching systems, and sophisticated computer modeling programs that had the potential to reveal previously undetectable connections between seemingly disparate pieces of evidence and potential suspects. Dr. Chin revisited Brittany's case armed with these powerful new tools, reprocessing evidence that had yielded no results when analyzed with earlier technology. The enhanced DNA analysis had the remarkable ability to detect genetic material from increasingly small samples, potentially revealing trace evidence that had been below previous detection thresholds. In 2013, technology keeps advancing, Dr. Chun explained to Detective Martinez during one of their periodic case reviews. What we couldn't see even 5 years ago might be clearly visible now. What we can't see today might be glaringly obvious 5 years from now. We never stop trying new approaches, and we never will. The ballistics evidence received particular attention with the aid of new computer modeling software that could more precisely match bullets to specific firearms. The .308 Winchester bullets recovered from the crime scene were meticulously compared against an ever-expanding database of test fires from seized weapons, with the hope of finding the elusive match that would finally identify both the murder weapon and its owner. Digital forensics had also evolved significantly, offering new and powerful possibilities for analyzing cell phone data, social media activities, and electronic financial records. Investigators diligently used these tools to create more detailed and accurate timelines of Brittany's final days, meticulously looking for subtle patterns or connections that might have been missed. During the original investigation, the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit had refined their offender profile based on new research into similar crimes and an improved understanding of criminal psychology. The updated profile suggested that the shooter might have possessed personal knowledge of Brittany's routine, indicating a connection to her life that investigators had not yet discovered. Detective Martinez coordinated closely with other law enforcement agencies to share information about similar unsolved cases, carefully looking for patterns that might indicate the presence of a serial offender. This enhanced communication between jurisdictions had already proven successful in solving several cold cases nationwide, demonstrating the immense value of persistent cooperation and comprehensive information sharing. Local media continued to provide periodic coverage of the case, often focusing on the technological advances that might eventually unlock the mystery and bring closure to the investigation. These stories served both to maintain public awareness and to remind potential witnesses that their information, regardless of how seemingly insignificant, remained valuable even years after the commission of the crime. The third anniversary of Brittany's murder brought renewed attention to the case, but also a growing sense of frustration with the lack of tangible progress. Community members who had initially rallied around the family with unwavering support began to express doubts about whether the crime would ever be solved, a sentiment that reflected the slow erosion of hope over time. The anniversary vigil drew a smaller crowd than in previous years, reflecting the natural decline of public attention as time marched onward. Sheriff Thompson acknowledged the community's frustration while steadfastly defending his department's continued and relentless efforts. "I understand that people are disappointed," he said with sincerity during the anniversary press conference. "We're disappointed, too, but giving up is simply not an option. As long as I'm sheriff, this case will remain a top priority." Someone out there knows what happened, and we're going to keep asking until they finally tell us the truth. The investigation had consumed thousands of hours of detective time and tens of thousands of dollars in forensic analysis, creating budget pressures that required careful justification to the county commissioners. Thompson had to carefully balance fiscal responsibility with his unwavering commitment to pursuing justice for Brittany, a challenge that many law enforcement agencies faced when dealing with long-term unsolved cases. Agent Foster from the FBI maintained periodic contact with local investigators, offering assistance whenever new leads emerged, but acknowledging the federal government's limited resources for cases without clear interstate connections. The relationship between local and federal authorities remained positive and collaborative, but the day-to-day responsibility for the investigation rested firmly with the Brown County Sheriff's Office. Brittany's daughter continued to thrive despite the traumatic beginning to her young life. Now a talkative and inquisitive 3-year-old with bright, sparkling eyes and an infectious smile, she had become a source of immense joy and unwavering hope for everyone who knew her story. Her remarkable resilience served as a daily reminder of what had been saved, even as the family continued to grieve what had been so tragically lost. The child's grandmother had become her primary caregiver, creating a stable, nurturing, and loving environment that helped to minimize the long-term effects of the early trauma she had experienced. Extended family members provided additional support, ensuring that the child would grow up surrounded by people who had known and deeply loved her mother. New tips still arrived occasionally, usually prompted by anniversary coverage in the media or documentary programs about unsolved crimes that captured public attention. Detective Martinez evaluated each one carefully and meticulously, hoping to find that elusive piece of information that would transform their cold case back into an active and vibrant investigation. Most of these tips proved to be irrelevant, but the possibility of a breakthrough, however slim, kept hope alive and fueled their determination. By 2016, the investigation had settled into a pattern of periodic review, and occasional flurries of intense activity when new tips emerged and demanded immediate attention. Detective Martinez had become the institutional memory for the case, maintaining detailed files and developing a comprehensive expertise in every single aspect of the crime. Her colleagues deeply respected her unwavering dedication, but they also worried about the emotional toll of carrying such a heavy burden for such a prolonged period. The Brown County Sheriff's Office had successfully solved numerous other cases during the intervening years, demonstrating their investigative capabilities and maintaining community confidence in local law enforcement. However, Brittany's murder remained the most high-profile unsolved case, a constant and persistent reminder of the limitations that even the most dedicated professionals faced when confronted with a seemingly perfect crime. Rumors and speculation had filled the void left by official silence about the investigation's progress. Coffee shop conversations and social media discussions generated theories that ranged from the plausible to the completely absurd, creating a background noise of suspicion and mistrust that affected community relationships. The absence of concrete facts had been replaced by an abundance of unfounded assumptions and conjectures. Some community members had begun to accept the grim reality that the case might never be solved, a psychological adaptation that allowed them to move forward with their lives while still clinging to the hope for eventual justice. Others remained convinced that authorities were withholding crucial information or had failed to pursue obvious leads, creating tensions that reflected broader societal skepticism about institutional competence. The families' public profile had evolved from that of grieving victims to that of persistent and unwavering advocates for justice. Their media appearances and public statements demonstrated remarkable strength and dignity under circumstances that would have undoubtedly destroyed less resilient people. Their example inspired other families facing similar tragedies while simultaneously maintaining unrelenting pressure on authorities to continue their tireless search for answers. Brittany's daughter had started attending preschool, reaching developmental milestones that would have filled her mother with immense pride and joy. The child's teachers and classmates were largely unaware of her dramatic early history, allowing her to experience normal childhood activities without the heavy burden of being defined by tragedy. The investigation team had been reduced to Detective Martinez and occasional consulting assistance from state and federal partners. The harsh reality of limited resources meant that active investigation occurred mainly when new leads emerged, with most of the detectives' time devoted to other cases that showed a greater promise of resolution. As the 5th anniversary of Brittany's murder approached, Detective Martinez made a crucial decision that would ultimately reinvigorate the investigation and inject it with new life. She formally requested permission to submit the case to the FBI's Cold Case Initiative, a highly regarded federal program that brought fresh analytical perspectives to stalled investigations. The program had achieved notable successes with cases that had frustrated local authorities for years, offering a glimmer of hope where little remained. The Cold Case Initiative review process involved a complete and thorough re-examination of all existing evidence, re-interviewing key witnesses, and the application of new investigative techniques that had been developed and refined since the original investigation. Agent Foster coordinated the federal review while maintaining respect for the diligent work that local authorities had already completed over the years. Sometimes a fresh set of eyes can see things that investigators who have been too close to a case for too long might miss. Agent Foster explained to Sheriff Thompson, "We're not criticizing the work that's been done. We're simply hoping that a different perspective might reveal something new, something that has been overlooked." The federal review team spent months meticulously analyzing every single aspect of the case, from the initial crime scene investigation through years of painstaking follow-up work. They re-interviewed family members, close friends, and potential witnesses who had been questioned previously, diligently looking for inconsistencies or overlooked details that might provide new investigative directions. Advances in geographic profiling, a sophisticated technique that analyzed crime locations to predict offender residence patterns, offered new possibilities for narrowing the suspect pool and focusing their investigative efforts. Computer models could now process vast amounts of data to identify subtle patterns that were virtually invisible to human analysis, potentially revealing the mathematical fingerprint of a serial offender. The review also included consultation with retired investigators who had worked on similar cases, bringing decades of invaluable experience to bear on the frustrating mystery. These seasoned professionals offered insightful perspectives based on patterns they had observed over long and distinguished careers, suggesting investigative approaches that might not have occurred to younger officers. The media attention surrounding the cold case initiative review generated dozens of new tips from the public, breathing new life into the dormant investigation. People who had been reluctant to come forward earlier were encouraged by the renewed federal interest, believing that their information might finally receive the attention it deserved. Detective Martinez worked tirelessly, often putting in overtime hours to evaluate each and every tip, desperately hoping that one might contain the key that would finally unlock the case and bring closure to the long and arduous investigation. The 10-year anniversary of Brittany's murder in 2023 marked a deeply significant milestone in the investigation, a somber reminder of the passage of time and the enduring pain of loss. A decade had passed since that terrible evening on State Route 68. Yet the case remained as compelling and frustrating as ever, a haunting testament to the complexities of justice. The anniversary brought extensive media coverage, with compelling documentaries and insightful podcast series examining every aspect of the crime and its devastating aftermath. Brittany's daughter, now a bright and thriving 11-year-old excelling in school, had grown into a remarkable young lady who brought immense joy to everyone who knew her. She bravely participated in the anniversary memorial service, lighting a candle in loving memory of the mother she had never really known, but whose enduring love continued to surround her through cherished family stories and treasured photographs. She will be so incredibly proud of the young lady you're becoming. Janet Stykes told her granddaughter during the emotional ceremony, her voice filled with love and admiration. Every single day, you grow more beautiful, more intelligent, more kind, just like your mama was. She's watching over you, and she's so very proud. The community response to the 10th anniversary demonstrated that Brown County had not forgotten Brittany or abandoned hope. For justice, their commitment unwavering despite the passage of time. Local businesses once again generously donated to the reward fund. Churches organized special prayer services, and residents proudly wore yellow ribbons in honor of Brittany's distinctive yellow Jeep. The collective memory of the tragedy had been transformed into a shared commitment to remembrance and the unwavering pursuit of justice. Sheriff Thompson, now in his final term before retirement, used the anniversary as an opportunity to reflect on the case that had defined much of his career in law enforcement, a case that had tested his resolve and pushed him to his limits. 10 years is a long time, but it's not forever, he told the gathered crowd, his voice filled with conviction. We've never stopped working this case. We've never stopped believing that someone out there knows what happened. We've never stopped hoping that they'll find the courage to come forward and tell us the truth. Detective Martinez, now a sergeant and the department's lead investigator on cold cases, had become nationally recognized for her unwavering persistence and her unparalleled expertise in the field. She had spoken at law enforcement conferences, consulted on similar cases in other jurisdictions, and maintained correspondence with families of unsolved murder victims across the country, offering them solace and support in their darkest hours. Brittany's case had profoundly shaped her career and her understanding of the complex and often agonizing relationship between justice and time. The investigation files now filled multiple filing cabinets, representing thousands upon thousands of hours of dedicated work by dozens of professionals who had contributed their expertise to the relentless search for answers. Every single lead had been meticulously followed, every possible suspect thoroughly investigated, and every piece of evidence analyzed with the most advanced techniques available. Yet, the killer remained unidentified, hidden somewhere in the vast landscape of possibilities, eluding justice for far too long. New technologies continued to emerge, offering renewed promise for solving cold cases and bringing closure to grieving families. Genetic genealogy had revolutionized forensic identification, using DNA evidence to trace family relationships that could eventually lead to previously unknown suspects. The technique had successfully solved dozens of cases that had baffled investigators for decades, offering new hope for Brittany's case, if any usable genetic evidence could be recovered from the crime scene. In early 2025, more than 11 years after Brittany's murder, Detective Sergeant Martinez received a phone call that would ultimately change everything about the case, transforming it from a cold case into a live and active investigation once again. A woman in neighboring Highland County had been reviewing old family photographs and discovered images that she believed might be relevant to the investigation, a potential breakthrough that sent a surge of adrenaline through the weary detective. Her ex-husband had owned a .308 Winchester rifle and had been acting strangely around the time of Brittany's murder, raising her suspicions. I didn't think much of it at the time, the caller explained, her voice trembling with nervous energy. But after our divorce, I found some things that didn't make sense. He had newspaper clippings about the shooting, and he got rid of his rifle right after it happened. I've been afraid to call for years, but I can't live with this anymore. Martinez felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that accompanied potentially significant developments in the case. She had received hundreds of similar calls over the years, most of them leading nowhere, but something about this woman's tone and the specificity of her information suggested genuine importance. The detective arranged an immediate interview, desperately hoping that this might finally be the break the case so desperately needed, the glimmer of hope that had eluded them for so long. The woman, identified as Rebecca Matthews, had been married to Thomas Matthews at the time of Brittany's murder. She brought with her a box of items she had discovered while cleaning out their former home, including newspaper clippings about the case, receipts from a gun store, and handwritten notes that appeared to reference the shooting, a treasure trove of potential evidence. Tom was always obsessed with guns and military tactics, Rebecca explained during the recorded interview, her voice laced with a mixture of fear and regret. He talked about being a sniper, about how easy it would be to shoot someone from a distance. I thought it was just his fantasies, but after Brittany was killed, he became different, paranoid, secretive, aggressive. The evidence Rebecca provided included receipts showing that Thomas Matthews had sold his .308 Winchester rifle to a gun shop in Cincinnati just 2 weeks after Brittany's murder. The timing was undeniably suspicious, but it was not conclusive proof of his involvement. Matthews had no apparent connection to Brittany, making it difficult to establish a motive for the senseless attack. Detective Martinez coordinated with the FBI and the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation to develop a comprehensive strategy for investigating Matthews without alerting him to their suspicions. They needed more solid evidence before making any confrontational moves, but the lead represented the most promising development in years, a potential turning point in the long and arduous investigation. A thorough background investigation revealed that Matthews was a 45-year-old military veteran with specialized training in marksmanship and tactical operations. He had struggled with employment and relationships since leaving the service, displaying behaviors consistent with undiagnosed PTSD and increasing social isolation, a troubling profile that raised further concerns. The investigation of Thomas Matthews required careful and meticulous coordination between multiple agencies to avoid compromising what might be their best opportunity to finally solve Brittany's case and bring her killer to justice. Surveillance teams established monitoring protocols, while forensic experts prepared to examine any evidence that might be recovered from Matthews' residence or possessions. Agent Foster returned to Brown County to coordinate the federal response to this significant development, signaling the importance of the lead and the commitment to pursuing it to its fullest extent. The FBI's involvement brought additional resources and specialized expertise, while also ensuring that any eventual prosecution would have the strongest possible foundation, leaving no room for error. We get one chance to do this right, Agent Foster emphasized during the investigative team briefing, her voice conveying the gravity of the situation. If Matthews is our shooter, we need overwhelming evidence to prove it beyond any reasonable doubt. If he's not, we need to eliminate him as a suspect without compromising any other leads we might develop. The gun shop in Cincinnati that had purchased Matthews' rifle confirmed the transaction and provided serial number information that could potentially link the weapon to the bullets recovered from Brittany's Jeep, a crucial piece of the puzzle. However, the rifle had been resold multiple times since 2013, requiring additional investigation to locate it for ballistics testing, a daunting task that demanded meticulous attention to detail. Psychological profilers from the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit reviewed the new information about Matthews and concluded that he fit many of the characteristics of their original offender profile, lending further credence to the investigation. His military training, his expertise with firearms, and his behavioral changes following the shooting all aligned with their analysis of the crime's planning and execution, painting a disturbing picture. Detective Martinez coordinated with Highland County authorities who knew Matthews from previous encounters with law enforcement, adding another layer of insight to the investigation. He had been arrested twice for domestic violence, both times involving firearms, and had been the subject of mental health interventions after threatening neighbors, revealing a pattern of escalating violence that was deeply concerning. The surveillance operation revealed Matthews' daily routines and habits, providing valuable information about his movements and associations, while investigators sought additional evidence that might support formal charges. They knew they needed more than suspicious behavior and coincidental timing to build a case that could withstand the intense scrutiny of trial proceedings. The investigation required patience, precision, and unwavering dedication to ensure that justice would finally be served for Brittany and her grieving family. Brittany's family was informed about the significant developments, but they were asked to maintain complete confidentiality until the investigation could be completed, protecting the integrity of the process. After more than 11 years of agonizing waiting, the possibility of finally finding answers brought both renewed hope and crippling anxiety about whether this lead would prove more substantial than previous disappointments. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source, a stroke of luck that would ultimately unravel the carefully constructed facade of the killer. While researching Matthew's background, investigators discovered that his sister had posted family photographs on social media that inadvertently documented his presence in Brown County on the day of Brittany's murder, a critical piece of evidence that shattered his alibi. The images showed Matthews at a family gathering just 20 miles from the crime scene, directly contradicting his previous statements about being out of state during that period, an undeniable lie. That exposed his deception. Detective Martinez felt the pieces of the puzzle beginning to align for the first time in over a decade, a sense of profound relief washing over her. The geographic connection, the suspicious disposal of his rifle, his disturbing behavioral changes, and now irrefutable proof of his presence in the area on the day of the murder created a compelling circumstantial case that warranted aggressive investigation. Agent Foster coordinated with federal prosecutors to prepare comprehensive search warrant applications for Matthew's residence and any storage facilities he might be renting, ensuring that no stone would be left unturned. The warrants needed to be comprehensive enough to recover any and all relevant evidence, while also being specific enough to satisfy judicial review, a delicate balance that required meticulous legal expertise. The legal foundation had to be absolutely perfect to ensure that any evidence recovered would be admissible in court, avoiding any potential for legal challenges that could jeopardize the entire case. The search warrant execution was meticulously planned as a coordinated operation involving local, state, and federal agents, recognizing the potential dangers involved. Matthews had demonstrated familiarity with firearms and military tactics, requiring careful preparation to ensure the safety of all officers involved while simultaneously preserving any evidence that might finally solve one of Ohio's most notorious cold cases. On March 15, 2025, at precisely 6 a.m., law enforcement officers surrounded Thomas Matthews' residence in Highland County, preparing to execute the carefully planned search warrant. The surprise raid successfully recovered ammunition, matching the .308 Winchester caliber used in Brittany's murder, handwritten notes that appeared to reference the shooting, and computer files containing detailed information about the case that had never been publicly released, a treasure trove of incriminating evidence. Matthews initially denied any involvement in Brittany's murder, but his carefully constructed story began to unravel under sustained and relentless questioning by Detective Martinez, who possessed an unparalleled understanding of the case. Drawing on 11 years of accumulated case knowledge, she skillfully presented evidence that directly contradicted his claims and demonstrated the implausibility of his denials. After 12 grueling hours of interrogation, Thomas Matthews finally confessed to shooting Brittany Stykes on August 28, 2013, bringing an end to the long and agonizing search for justice. The confession revealed a chilling motive rooted in deep-seated mental illness and distorted thinking, a glimpse into the dark recesses of a disturbed mind. Matthews claimed he had selected Brittany randomly, wanting to commit the perfect murder to prove his tactical superiority, a horrifying and senseless act of violence. He had stalked several potential victims before ultimately choosing her based on her predictable routine and the isolated location of the attack, revealing a calculated and premeditated plan. The arrest sent shock waves through both the Brown County and Highland County communities, finally bringing a sense of closure to a case that had haunted the region for over a decade. After more than 11 years of speculation, frustration, and unanswered questions, the man responsible for one of the region's most heinous crimes was finally in custody, facing the consequences of his actions. The news spread rapidly through social media and traditional news outlets, bringing a mixture of profound relief and renewed grief to everyone who had followed the case and had been touched by the tragedy. The news of Thomas Matthews' arrest reached Brittany's family through a phone call from Detective Martinez, a call that they had been both hoping for and dreading for more than 11 years. Janet Stykes collapsed in tears, overwhelmed by the flood of emotions that accompanied the end of their long and arduous wait for justice. A mix of relief, sorrow, and a profound sense of closure. The arrest brought both closure and renewed pain as they confronted the stark reality of why their beloved daughter had been so senselessly taken from them. "I never stopped believing that this day would come," Janet said through tears during an impromptu press conference outside the family home, her voice filled with emotion. Brittany can finally rest in peace, knowing that the man who took her life will face justice for his heinous crime. "Our granddaughter can grow up knowing that the system worked, even though it took longer than we hoped." The community response was immediate and intense, a collective outpouring of relief and gratitude. Brown County residents gathered at the courthouse and at the memorial site where Brittany was remembered each year, sharing their relief and gratitude that the case had finally been solved, bringing an end to the long chapter of uncertainty. Local news stations provided continuous coverage as details of the arrest and the chilling confession became public, keeping the community informed of the latest developments. Sheriff Thompson, now just weeks away from retirement, held a press conference to announce the successful conclusion of the investigation that had defined much of his final years in office, a fitting culmination to his distinguished career. Standing beside Detective Martinez, Agent Foster, and the other dedicated investigators who had worked tirelessly on the case, he thanked the community for their unwavering patience and persistence in keeping Brittany's memory alive and demanding justice. "This arrest represents the best of law enforcement cooperation and unwavering dedication," Thompson declared with pride. Detective Martinez never gave up, never wavered in her commitment. "Our federal partners provided crucial support, and the community never stopped hoping for justice. Brittany Stykes can finally rest in peace, and her daughter can grow up knowing that justice was ultimately served." The legal proceedings would take months to complete, but Matthews' detailed confession and the overwhelming physical evidence recovered during the search provided a strong and irrefutable foundation for a successful prosecution. District Attorney Sarah Williams announced her intention to seek the death penalty, citing the particularly heinous nature of the crime and the additional trauma inflicted on an innocent child, sending a strong message that such acts of violence would not be tolerated. Brittany's daughter, now at the age of 12, and with the maturity to grasp the profound significance of the arrest, Brittany's daughter participated in a family statement, expressing their heartfelt gratitude to each and every person who had dedicated their time and effort to solving her mother's heartrending murder. Her extraordinary strength in the face of renewed media attention served as a powerful testament to the indomitable resilience that had defined her entire life. The arrest itself ignited a firestorm of national media coverage, with major news networks and true crime podcasts alike meticulously dissecting and covering the resolution of a case that had captured the public's imagination for well over a decade. The compelling story of unwavering persistence in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds deeply resonated with audiences who had followed similar cases and held onto the fervent hope of witnessing similar resolutions. Thomas Matthews was brought before the Brown County Common Pleas Court for his arraignment, facing charges of aggravated murder, attempted murder, and firearm specifications that carried the potential for the death penalty. The courtroom was overflowing with family members, deeply concerned community residents, and media representatives who had diligently followed the case from its very beginning back in 2013. Matthews, clad in an orange jail uniform and bound by shackles, displayed absolutely no emotion as the charges against him were read aloud. His court-appointed attorney entered a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity, thereby setting the stage for a protracted and complex legal battle that would heavily scrutinize his mental state at the time of the shooting, as well as his competency to stand trial. The prosecution team, spearheaded by District Attorney Williams, presented compelling evidence of premeditation and meticulous planning, which directly contradicted the defense's claims of mental illness. The prosecution argued that Matthews had demonstrated a clear understanding of the difference between right and wrong, had taken deliberate steps to avoid detection, and had successfully evaded capture for more than 11 years through the careful concealment of evidence. Brittany's family attended every single court hearing, their unwavering presence serving as a constant and poignant reminder of the devastating human cost of Matthews' heinous actions. They maintained their composure and dignity throughout the entire proceedings while ensuring that Brittany's memory remained at the very center of the pursuit of justice. Their granddaughter, now of an age where she could fully comprehend the proceedings, made the difficult decision not to attend, but voiced her unwavering support for the family's determination to seek the maximum punishment allowed by law. The preparation for the trial brought forth additional chilling details about Matthews' meticulous planning and execution of the murder. Evidence revealed that he had conducted surveillance of potential victims for weeks before finally selecting Brittany. He had practiced shooting at similar distances and had even prepared elaborate escape routes and carefully constructed alibis well in advance. The sheer level of premeditation severely undermined any and all claims of impaired mental capacity. Detective Martinez gave compelling testimony about the 11-year-long investigation, carefully walking the jury through the methodical and painstaking process that had ultimately identified Matthews as the perpetrator. Her testimony shone a bright light on the unwavering dedication of the law enforcement professionals who had steadfastly refused to give up, despite years of frustration and countless dead ends. The defense team struggled mightily to present a coherent argument for mental illness, given the overwhelming weight of evidence pointing to careful planning and rational behavior. Matthews' military training and tactical expertise further undermined the claims of diminished capacity, clearly demonstrating his ability to think clearly and execute complex plans, even while purportedly grappling with psychological issues. The jury deliberated for less than 6 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all charges. The undeniable evidence of premeditation, the callous disregard for innocent life, and Matthews' own confession left virtually no room for doubt regarding his responsibility for Brittany's murder and the attempted murder of her child. The sentencing hearing for Thomas Matthews drew an even larger crowd than the trial itself, with people traveling from all across Ohio to witness the final chapter in one of the state's most notorious cold cases. Brittany's family was granted the solemn opportunity to present victim impact statements, which would play a crucial role in helping the judge determine whether Matthews would receive life in prison or the death penalty. Janet Stykes spoke first, her voice remarkably steady despite the tears that streamed down her face as she poignantly described the profound impact of losing her beloved daughter and very nearly losing her precious granddaughter. "You didn't just kill Brittany," she said, looking directly at Matthews with unwavering resolve. "You killed our dreams, our peace of mind, our sense of safety in the world, but you didn't kill our love for her or our determination to see justice done." The child who had miraculously survived Matthews' attack, now 13 years old, made the brave decision to address the court in a written statement that was read aloud by the prosecutor. Her words displayed remarkable maturity and strength far beyond her years. "I don't remember my mother, but I feel her love every day through my family. The man who tried to kill us both failed because love is stronger than hate. And good people never stop fighting for what's right. Matthews was given the opportunity to address the court before sentencing, but he declined to speak. His silence stood in stark contrast to the profoundly emotional testimony offered by Brittany's family and the countless community members who had been deeply affected by his horrific actions. The complete absence of remorse or any explanation left many lingering questions unanswered regarding his true motives and mindset. Judge Robert Harrison handed down a sentence of death by lethal injection, citing the aggravating circumstances of the case and the complete lack of mitigating factors that might have justified a lesser punishment. The sentence was met with spontaneous applause from the courtroom gallery, powerfully reflecting the community's unwavering desire for ultimate justice in response to such ultimate evil. The legal process would continue through mandatory appeals and thorough review procedures that could potentially take years to complete. However, the conviction and death sentence provided a profound sense of closure that had eluded Brittany's family and the entire community for more than a decade. Justice had been undeniably delayed, but it had most certainly not been denied. Detective Martinez, now contemplating her own retirement after a distinguished career highlighted by her tireless work, on this particular case, reflected on the long and arduous journey from crime scene to courtroom. "It took 12 years, but we never stopped believing that this day would come," she said with a sense of profound relief. Brittany's family deserved answers, and they never stopped fighting for them. That's what made all the difference. The case had become a textbook example of how unwavering persistence, technological advancements, and strong community support could ultimately solve even the most challenging and complex cold cases. Law enforcement agencies across the country studied the investigation as a model for handling similar cases, carefully learning from both the successes and the setbacks that had characterized the long and difficult pursuit of justice. The story of Brittany Stykes had been transformed from a tale of senseless violence into a powerful source of inspiration for families facing similar tragedies and law enforcement professionals grappling with seemingly impossible cases. Her enduring legacy lived on through her daughter's extraordinary resilience, her family's unwavering advocacy, and the community's steadfast commitment to never forgetting the victims of violent crime. 5 months after Thomas Matthews' sentencing, the Brown County community gathered for a deeply moving memorial service that celebrated both Brittany's life and the long-awaited resolution of her case. The service held a different feel from previous annual remembrances because it carried a profound sense of completion that had been notably absent for more than 12 years. Justice had finally been served, allowing the community to properly and fully honor Brittany's memory without the haunting shadow of an unsolved crime hanging over them. The memorial featured speakers who had known Brittany personally, sharing heartfelt stories that painted a vivid picture of a young woman whose innate kindness and unwavering optimism had touched the lives of everyone around her. Friends from high school fondly recalled her infectious laughter and her dreams of raising a large and loving family. Coworkers remembered her steadfast dedication and positive attitude, even during the most challenging times. Pastor Edwards, who had delivered Brittany's eulogy more than a decade earlier, spoke eloquently about the difficult journey from tragedy to justice that had tested everyone's faith, but ultimately demonstrated the remarkable power of persistence and unwavering community support. Brittany's story doesn't end with her death or even with her killer's conviction, he said with conviction. It continues through her daughter, through the lives she touched, and through the example of never giving up on justice. Brittany's daughter, now a teenager preparing for high school, participated in the service by reading a poignant poem she had written about the mother she had never truly known, but whose enduring love continued to guide her life. Her moving words brought tears to the eyes of everyone present, demonstrating how the legacy of love could transcend even death and violence. The service concluded with the unveiling of a permanent memorial in Brittany's honor, generously funded by donations from community members who were determined to ensure that her story would never be forgotten. The memorial featured her photograph, a brief biography highlighting her roles as a beloved daughter, devoted wife, and loving mother, and an inscription that read, "Her light continues to shine through those who loved her and those who fought for justice." Detective Martinez, recently retired but still actively involved in cold case consulting, spoke with passion about the importance of never giving up on victims and their grieving families. "Every case matters, every victim deserves justice, and every family deserves answers," she stated emphatically. "Brittany's case taught me that time doesn't heal all wounds, but it can eventually reveal all truths." The gathering represented far more than just a memorial service. It was the community's collective exhale after holding its breath for more than 12 long years. The resolution of Brittany's case had restored faith in the justice system and powerfully demonstrated that even the most challenging and complex crimes could eventually be solved through unwavering dedication and relentless persistence. As the crowd dispersed, many attendees paused at the memorial to leave flowers, offer prayers, or simply stand in silent reflection about the arduous journey from tragedy to justice that had defined their community for more than a decade. The memorial would serve as a permanent reminder that love endures, justice ultimately prevails, and good people never cease fighting for what is right. The final chapter of Brittany Stykes' story closed not with her tragic death on a country road in 2013, but with facing the inevitable consequences of his horrific actions. While Brittany's legacy continued to inspire others facing similar tragedies, the case had become a powerful symbol of hope for families grappling with unsolved crimes, demonstrating that persistence and unwavering faith could ultimately overcome even the most challenging obstacles to justice. Detective Martinez received heartfelt letters from families across the country who drew strength from Brittany's story and the unwavering determination that had ultimately solved her case. Brown County had been forever changed by the experience of living with an unsolved murder for more than a decade. The community had learned difficult lessons about trust, safety, and the paramount importance of supporting each other through times of profound trauma. They had also learned that good people working together could indeed overcome evil, even when success seemed utterly impossible. Brittany's daughter continued to thrive, her remarkable resilience serving as a daily reminder of what had been salvaged from the senseless violence that had claimed her mother's life. She carried forward the best qualities of the woman she had never really known: kindness, strength, optimism, and an unshakable faith in the enduring power of love to overcome darkness. The investigation had consumed more than 12 years and countless hours of dedicated work by dozens of tireless professionals. It had tested the very limits of forensic science, investigative techniques, and human persistence. But it had ultimately succeeded in its fundamental mission, ensuring that a cold-blooded killer faced justice and that a cherished victim was never forgotten. The story of Brittany Sherry Stykes stood as both a profound tragedy and an inspiring testament, a poignant reminder that evil undeniably exists in the world, but that good people will never cease fighting against it. Her death had been senseless, but her legacy was deeply meaningful. Her life had been tragically cut short, but her impact would endure through all the lives she had touched and all the people who had steadfastly refused to let her story end with violence. In the years that followed Matthew's conviction, Brittany's case would be meticulously studied by law enforcement academies, featured in compelling true crime documentaries, and referenced by countless other families seeking justice for their own beloved lost ones. Her story had become an integral part of the larger narrative about crime and justice in America, serving as powerful proof that the arc of justice, though it may be long, ultimately bends towards righteousness. The final artifact in Brittany's story was not a piece of physical evidence or a legal document, but something intangible yet profoundly powerful: the collective memory of a community that had refused to forget, a family that had never stopped believing in a system of justice that had eventually worked, despite its inherent imperfections and agonizing delays. August 28th, 2013. It was a typical, balmy summer evening in Brown County, Ohio. Brittany Sherry Stykes, a vibrant 22-year-old, carefully secured her 4-month-old daughter in the back of her bright yellow Jeep Wrangler. Brittany, pregnant with her second child, had a radiant glow about her, a visible promise of the joy a growing family brings. She tenderly kissed her toddler's forehead before settling into the driver's seat. The drive along State Route 68, near Ripley, should have been a breeze, a route Brittany knew like the back of her hand, having traveled it countless times. Fields stretched out endlessly on both sides, bathed in the golden hues of the fading sunlight. Her daughter, happily gurgling and babbling, filled the back seat with innocent sounds. Then, without warning,